Ohayo gozaimasu. So we're going to start off, as we always do, with breathing. And what is this herb here that she has? So I have my old rosemary, but I have the new rosemary. But when I crush and sniff this, oh my God, it's amazing. However, it goes all over the floor and you have to get out the vacuum cleaner, which is a drag. But anyway, so here's the rosemary. And I have lots to say about this today, but that's not what we're discussing with Hannah. And this is thyme, also again. And this is sage. Anyway, so this week I got a text, 10:30 at night saying, help, can you help me with my Richard III class tomorrow morning? I'm like, thanks for the, advance notice. But I did it. Basically, the class, a college professor, a friend of mine, was teaching in a theater class, Teenage Dick, which is a play, a modernized adaptation of Richard III that they did at the public in the before times to great acclaim, set obviously in a high school. A lot of the kids had disabilities because Richard traditionally has a hump on his back and supposedly some sort of thing with his hand, maybe some sort of little deformity with his hand. So I said sure, and I love doing that, and I love going on it, but I thought I'll just give them a few sort of quick hits to talk about what to look for in a modernized version, because one of the things that you can't do in a modernized version, although maybe you can, this is an interesting thing to think about and look for, is multi-layered puns. And I had a teacher years ago, I don't even think it was an acting teacher, but anyway, it's terrible that I can't remember who it is because it was such a profound thing that I always remember. Shakespeare never said one thing when he could say two. He never said two things when he could say three. So there are a lot of layered puns, and part of that is rhetorical devices. And rhetoric and the rules of rhetoric and the sort of people had fun with words, and they played with puns, and they played with metaphor, and they did all of this kind of wordplay to delight. And the primary aspect of that is delight. Philip Sidney, the other famous poet at the time, said that everything should be learning through delight. And I was thinking about that, delight, of light, of the light. And so as we move into the season of light, we already had the solstice, and our time has changed and all of that kind of stuff. So, and we are in May 2nd. Yesterday was May Day, a day of great festival and Beltane, taken from the pagan tradition. Goddess of fertility, Flora, Queen Elizabeth, often dressed up as Flora. I have a painting or a picture or sketch of that, which I cannot find when I was doing my garden paper on her. So that goddess of flowers, goddess of flora and sort of fauna, that's really more animals. But anyway, so the perfect line for this day is, rough winds do shake the darling buds of May. And it's very famous, starts off, shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Thou art more beautiful and more temperate, and rough winds do shake the darling buds of May. Now, I read a research paper, and the guy posited that it was actually daring buds of May, which is a daring claim. But as I've said before, in Shakespeare, people argue about everything. I thought the plants would be a nice, benign topic. No, don't get me started on the peonies. Someday we'll do a thing on the peonies and the lack of peonies. But anyway, that's another story. So I mentioned this in a talk, and somebody was like, no, it's not. It's darling. So Shakespeare says darling about 8 times, and in the canon, and he says daring 15 plus times. And I say plus because one is in the sort of various poetry category, and that's always a sort of gray area. But anyway, it could be either. It's sort of fun to think about how that shades the line differently. But traditionally it's darling buds of May. And May itself people often think it's the month of May, but hawthorn, which is what we're going to be looking at today, are called May buds, presumably because they bloom in May. But when they say bringing in the May, they're talking about May buds. And when they just say May, it's the month. And which came first, the month or the buds? So that's another thing, and that's what we were talking about in Richard III versus Teenage Dick. The famous lines in the beginning of Richard III are, "Made glorious summer by this son of York." And it's written the golden son, but the wordplay is that he was a golden son, S-O-N. And so it's always fun to think about these things and how they shift meanings, right? Or how they layer, or how they nuance meanings. And one of the reasons that we do this, one of the reasons I do this, is to sharpen the brain. And thinking about these things fires up the synapses. So, and then also the herbs. And so I had gotten an email about the 10 best herbs that are good for your brain, that help your memory. And a lot of people I know are very concerned about their memory. And this is why, another reason why I say, learn one line a week. One line a week, because it's the working out of the brain. And that's really not taxing. We used to do a thing in the Shakespeare workout, which the book is partially dedicated to, where you had to memorize 4 to 14 lines once a week. And that is also good for the brain. So obviously that's like increasing your weights, right? So we're starting with one. We're starting with like lifting the little herbs. And so it had these herbs, and in the thing it said, we have a Shakespeare tip. And I'm like, somebody has been listening, which was great. And so I looked at the thing, and of course there are like 6 Shakespeare herbs. Rosemary, that's for remembrance. It is for your memory. They've done tests on this stuff. The smell gets it right into the system, which activates the vagus nerve, brain to heart, brain to body. And then also, so the reason I have sage is another one. Sage is not in Shakespeare, and I made our singers at one point sing partially sedge, rosemary and thyme, because sedge is in Shakespeare. This has a very kind of sour smell, almost a little bit like hemp, or, yeah, I know, it's an okay smell, but it fires up the brain. The other ones, of course, are mint. I don't have any mint today, but those are the 2 that I always say, get rosemary and mint. You can always get them at the grocery store. And what we're going to talk about with Hannah today is the darling buds of May. And that is hawthorn. And it was one of the ones that caused me a lot of anxiety, because going back, we had all the hawthorn. There's 10 quotes, but sometimes it only says May, and they're not listed elsewhere because they think it's the month of May, but actually it's the buds of May. So there is, and she's laughing. Okay.
Hello. Hello. Happy May.
So, darling buds of May, I don't have any, except, look at that. There you are. And the wind is shaking it.
It is very windy here. Well, it has been very windy this week. So, yeah, it has definitely shaken the darling buds of May. But normally on May Day, it's blooming. And it's not.
It's not blooming. Okay, because it's been too cold, or what is its reticence? It's still in lockdown?
Basically, yeah. I mean, we have had the driest April for a long time on record. The ground here is really, really cracked. So everything's kind of suffering a bit for that. But also, it has been really cold. We have had so many frosts this April. We're still having frosts now. And I'm hoping, we're hoping next week the weather's going to change a bit. But this started in sort of March time. It was looking like this was going to come out and be kind of on time, because usually, you get some by the end of April, but this year it's just gone, nope, too cold, too dry, staying asleep.
Wow. So the darling buds of May may not show up until summer's date. That has all too short a lease. Okay, well, so now Hannah did this amazing segment for the Urban Tree Festival, which is where we met virtually, on healing properties of hawthorn. Is that right? Now, I never would have put that together. So tell us about the healing properties of hawthorn.
Oh, it's so good. Everyone should have some hawthorn in their house at some point, because there is going to be some point during the year when you need it, either medicinally for something physical or something that is something a bit more emotional. So I'll start off with the emotional side first. So
can I stop you for a second and say, how do you have it in your house? Do you grow a little tree? Do you grow it in a pot? How do you have it in your house?
Just keep some in. So when it comes into flower, just go out and pick a few of these, because this is all you need. Just a couple of tips like that. Wow. Maybe go and pick, I don't know, maybe 6 or 8, and just dry them out. Leave them to dry on something, or you've got a dehydrate or something like that. And then basically just keep it stored in a pot, and then you can just use one sprig in a cup of tea whenever you need. That's the easiest way to keep it, really.
Okay, so what does the hawthorn do? You say it's physical, emotional, and I forget what the third one was already.
Well, there's
lighting the rose.
That's kind of it, because it's rose family. So anything that's rose family is kind of all to do with the heart. So when you think of hawthorn, it's another thing that we can use for the emotional heart. So it's something we can use if we are heartbroken, if we're grief stricken, if something has really tugged at our heartstrings. It's something that we can have a cup of to basically give some emotional comfort, an emotional uplift. That's where it's kind of coming from the emotional side.
Okay, and do you sniff it? Do you put it in a tea? How do you bring its benefits to you? Tea.
Definitely a cup of tea, and it's an interesting it's an interesting herb, actually, because it contains lots of flavonoids. So flavonoids comes from flavus, the Latin flavus, which means yellow. So whenever you make a tea out of hawthorn, it kind of turns this sort of orangey kind of yellow color, and it's a pleasant kind of floral drink to drink. Really, it's really just inhaling the tea is really quite pleasant.
I just had this idea that it's very tough for New Yorkers. I mean, we have the green market, and they've been out of nettles they just haven't had them for the last 2-3 weeks. And I kept saying, we just did a show on nettles. You have to have the nettles. But hawthorn too, like if we had a healing garden that people could go to, wouldn't that be amazing in urban areas or on rooftops or something? So many things to fix, so many things to build back better, right? Okay, so you take the tea for the emotional heart, and then what is the physical aspect?
So the physical action, I mean, when you kind of go back to Culpeper's day, that in his time, in sort of the 1600s, it was more employed for its use for helping to break up urinary stones, but that's not really something we use it for now. So now it's all about the cardiovascular system. It's all about being a cardiac tonic, kind of restorative, and it helps to lower high blood pressure, and it helps to dilate the coronary and peripheral vasodilation. So it helps to widen the arteries and help blood to pass through. So by doing that, what it's doing is it brings a better supply of blood to the heart, so improves oxygen levels. Going back to that sort of,
I had a friend's son who's 29 and had a heart attack. I mean, that's the American diet, or sometimes it's hereditary and stuff like that. So, so we should be plying him with hawthorn tea again, for that, to get that into the blood.
Tea is fairly safe. I mean, if you're taking any cardiac medication, it's also it's also quite important, to make sure it's going to be safe alongside that medication. But it's, in terms of the other kind of actions that it has, it helps to, if people have a heart that's out of rhythm, it can help to basically balance the rhythm of the heart. So it's called an anti-arrhythmic. So it stops it from being out of rhythm. But then it's also it's helpful for people presenting with arteriosclerosis, so that hardening of the artery. So its antioxidant properties play into that. It's ever so slightly, but not always, in some cases, slightly sedative. But it's, the thing that it does really well is it helps to improve the contraction of the heart, so it makes the heart function better. So it's kind of what it does. It's all about the cardiovascular system and the benefits that it can bring to that. And whether it's, the leaf of flower in the spring, or if it's the berries in the autumn that can be extracted in, you can put hawthorn berries in brandy and steep them for a month and then strain them off, and then you've got hawthorn brandy. You can extract it that way. It's just all year round great.
So somebody just made the comment that it's a vasorelaxant, right? That's what you're saying is the what is the technical term?
So it helps to relax and dilate the vessels. So it helps blood to move more freely through the cardiovascular system.
Okay, I'm just going to sneak in a little aside there. There's some stuff in Shakespeare about the circulation of the blood long before it was sort of officially discovered. And so this is another thing why I'm a Shakespeare pusher, because, and you're a herb pusher, I'm an herb pusher too, is because it has this intrinsic knowledge in there that you just sort of, you absorb like tea, right? Anyway, so what's one more that we can look to Hawthorn for?
So one final thing that you can look to it for is that it really, really does have a good place for people experiencing menopausal hot flushes. Because by nature of it being rose family, so everything that's rose family is generally cooling and drying. So for people that have very, very wet hot flushes during the menopause, it can be very cooling and very drying. But then also, the moods can shift and change through the fluctuating hormones. So, having that sort of emotional aspect too is, pretty good.
Thanks, Nick. Yes, it's already on the link tree. So if it's cooling and drying, is it good even for those really hot summers? I mean, you said you've had this really dry April, and I remember I was there in England a couple summers ago, and it was 2018, I think. No rain at all, and all the green little squares turned brown, and I mean, it was just dry as a bone. So if you're too hot, can you take a cup of hawthorn tea or something and kind of cool yourself down a little bit?
Well, you could, but to be honest with that, you probably want to be looking more towards elderflower, which is diaphoretic, so it sort of opens the vessels and helps the body to sweat and take out excess heat. So if you're too hot, you need what's called diaphoretic to help to move that heat outwards.
Okay, well, I'm going to have a lot of that then. I guess I can't stand the summer. Everybody has their season. So thank you so much. This was just wonderful. A little amuse booth for all the things that Hawthorn can do. And again, you mentioned it as an herb, but we normally think of it as a tree. And so it's just, again, like I was saying with the words, it's nuance and layered. Not only layered meanings, but layered uses, right? So with that, parting is such sweet sorrow. Oh, I want to say about morrow. Morrow is one of those really interesting words that has an archaic meaning of in the near future. It's not just tomorrow. It can be morning, it can be the next day, or it can be just in the near future. So parting is such sweet sorrow that I shall say good night, goodbye, until it be morrow. Thank you, Hannah.
Bye.